It is Friday, so it is time for Brunch with Bernie. Senator Bernie Sanders taking your calls in our National Town Hall meeting. Senator Sanders, welcome.
Good to be with you, Tom.
Great to have you with us. So what's on your plate right now?
Well, there's a lot that's going on. I want to take a moment to kind of focus on a recent poll that came out by the American Values Survey Group. And what they did is they asked the American people questions about the economy. And to nobody's surprise, it turns out that the vast majority of the American people have major concerns about where we are today and, in fact, where we should be going. And the point that this reemphasizes, something that you and I have talked about a whole lot, is that the views that we hold are what the majority of the American people believe. And the problem we have politically is that our right-wing friends have been very, very successful time and time again deflecting attention away from the major economic issues facing this country, issues in which the American people are quite united about how they want to go forward. For example, 66, in terms of this poll, 66% of Americans agree that the government should do more to reduce the gap between the rich and the poor. Two-thirds of the American people. That includes moderates, that includes conservatives, who understand that income and wealth inequality is an enormously important issue in this country, has to be addressed. Two-thirds, I'm talking about 51%, two-thirds of the American people think we should go forward and address that issue. 57% of Americans favor increasing the tax rate on Americans earning more than $250,000 per year, while 37% are opposed. Again, strong support based on the understanding that the wealthiest people in this country are doing very, very well and that they are not paying their fair share of taxes. Now, if you listen to the Republicans and some Democrats, it would be hard to imagine that 57% of the American people believe in progressive taxation. Here's another one. We got a Republican Party in Washington where there is virtually no support for raising the minimum wage above the starvation level it is in right now at $7.25 an hour. And here's what the poll says. 69% of Americans favor increasing the minimum wage from $7.25 to $10.10 an hour. 69%.
Wow.
That's just not Democrats. That's just not independents. Those are Republicans as well. Listen to this. 78% of Americans favor requiring companies to provide all full-time employees with paid leave for the birth or adoption of a child. 81% of Americans favor requiring companies to provide all full-time employees with paid sick days if they or an immediate family member gets sick. 64% of Americans believe the economic system in this country unfairly favors the wealthy. 64% of Americans believe that the government is not run for the benefit of all of the people. So what you have right now, and those are just some of the issues raised in the poll. So you have a situation where ordinary Americans understand that the economy today is not doing well for the middle class or working families, and in fact the middle class is disappearing. We have almost as many people today living in poverty as ever in the history of America. They understand the wealthy and large corporations are doing phenomenally well, and they want the government to take action. That's what they want. Mm-hmm. And yet you have a Republican Party which disagrees with every issue that the American people feel strongly about. They're opposed to raising the minimum wage. They're opposed to pay equity. They're opposed to changing trade policies, which allow corporations to shift jobs to China, Vietnam, and Mexico. They are opposed to a significant jobs program, which will rebuild our infrastructure, put our people back to work. So you have this parallel universe where in Washington, where you have a Republican Party and some Democrats, heavily influenced by big money, have one set of ideas, and in the real world, there's a whole different set of ideas. And if you throw in issues like Social Security, where you have the Republican Party and some Democrats wanting to cut Social Security, this poll didn't deal with that issue, but overwhelmingly people say, are you kidding? You shouldn't cut Social Security. You should increase and expand Social Security benefits. So I think what we have to focus on is not necessarily to believe that the issues being raised by the media or by the Republican Party are the issues that working families or the middle class or the average person is mostly concerned about. And we can't lose sight of that. It's very easy to do that. But the bottom line is the American people want a government that stands up for all of us, that makes sure that our people have health care, have decent paying jobs, have educational opportunities, don't leave college deeply in debt. They want us to live in a society where we have pay equity, where women earn the same amount for doing the same work as men do. They want to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure. And that is what the vast majority of the people want. And then on the other side, you have the big money interests who have a very, very different agenda. And their agenda is to give more tax breaks to the very wealthy and to large corporations working overtime trying to do that. Their agenda is to do what they call entitlement reform. And my friends, anytime you hear somebody talking about entitlement reform, that's just code language for cutting Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, something that the American people absolutely do not want. The American people are concerned. I was part of a march last weekend of 400,000 people in New York City demanding that the United States and countries, governments all over the world deal with this crisis of global warming, transform our energy system. That is not what the Koch brothers and other big money interests want. So we live in a very, very strange world where the big money interests are living in a set of policies, are pushing a set of policies which is far removed from where the American people are and what they want. And, I hope that people understand that when they feel the need and the belief that government should create millions of jobs because real unemployment is at 12%, you're not alone. That is what the vast majority of the people want. And if you believe that the minimum wage of $7.25 is really a starvation wage, it has to be raised, that is what the American people want. So it's important that we not allow ourselves to get our attention deflected by the corporate media or by Republicans or some Democrats. The issues that you and I talk about every single week, Tom, those are what the vast majority of the American people want. Now, are there other issues where there is a division of opinion? Yeah. On the issue of abortion, the issue of guns, gay rights, all that stuff, there are divisions, no question. But on basic economic issues, if we stand together, if we elect people who are prepared to fight for the middle class and working families of this country, we can bring about some very fundamental changes and improve lives for a whole lot of people.
Yeah, and an important step. Meanwhile, you've got states like Wisconsin that now has succeeded in knocking 300,000 people off the voting rolls because they don't have ID. They're going to have to issue IDs at the rate of 6,000 a day. And Scott Walker just closed 48 of the state's 72 counties, the DMV offices, down to 2 days a week, weekdays only.
Well, look, everybody should understand that no matter what any of these guys say, they're concerned about voter fraud and all that stuff. That's crap. What they are concerned about is one thing. They understand, apropos what I've just been talking about, they understand that ideologically the vast majority of the people are against their agenda. Right. So what they're trying to do is keep as many people as possible from being even able to vote. And I've said time and time again, that is, you can disagree on an issue, but to go out of your way to keep people from voting is not American, and it's cowardly.
Senator Bernie Sanders with us. It's our Brunch with Bernie Hour, our national town hall meeting with Senator Sanders. He'll be taking your calls right after this break. It's 15 minutes past the hour. Be sure to check out Bernie's website, sanders.senate.gov. And for all the information that you hear about on this program and a whole lot, we'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
You can also easily find Bernie's very, very active Facebook page over on Facebook, and you can tweet to him as well. And welcome back. Vicki you ready to take calls, Senator?
Yeah.
Okay, Vicki in Marion, Michigan, watching Free Speech TV on the DirecTV satellite. You are on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. This is about the climate change issue. And just in the narrative we're hearing about the government needs to do, the states need to do, the cities need to do, like that. And I have a friend who tried to put up one of those little individual wind spires in his own farmhouse, and the little local government told him he couldn't do it for some unknown reason, wouldn't give him a permit. And it occurred to me that if the bigger organizations aren't going to do this, maybe we as individuals need to rise up on a grassroots basis and just start doing it. Quit contributing to the problems of the environment and global warming and retrofitting our own houses. I don't know if there's a way to help support a more individual movement on this.
Well, Vicki, thank you for your comments. And I think for those of us who understand that climate change is the most significant environmental planetary crisis that we face, the response has got to be at all levels, individual, local, state, and federal. And you're right that in many communities around America, not just Michigan, there is opposition to sustainable energy, and that's an issue that state government and, in fact, the federal government has got to address. In my view, the federal government can play an enormously important role by investing heavily in sustainable energy. We got some legislation passed a few years ago that put over $3 billion into energy efficiency, helping people retrofit and weatherize their homes. There is enormous potential in so many areas for us to cut back on the use of carbon, and we've got to continue working on that at every level.
Jeremy in Cherokee, Alabama, watching Free Speech TV on the Dish Network. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Senator, do you support the repeal of marijuana prohibition?
Let me tell you this, Jeremy. When I was mayor of Burlington, and we have a university town here, and I don't believe anybody got arrested for smoking marijuana. And I think, what Colorado is doing is interesting. I'm not a great fan of drugs. I got to say that. On the other hand, it would be hard for me to argue with you that marijuana is a worse product than tobacco. So I think let's see what Colorado does and go from there.
Watch the experiment.
Yeah.
We have 30 seconds? About 30 seconds to the break, Senator. I'm curious, the survey that you opened the show with, I went over to sanders.senate.gov and I didn't see it.
We'll get it up. I don't think it is up. It's done by a group called the American Values Survey.
Okay.
It was on September 23rd, very, very recent poll.
Okay, I'll have to track that down because that is.
Well, it confirms, what I think and most listeners know, that the issues that we raise are not fringe issues. It is a fringe position to talk about more tax breaks for the rich and large corporations. Very few people support that. Stuff that we talk about, which protects the middle class and working families, is exactly where the vast majority of the people in this country are.
We'll be back with Senator Bernie Sanders answering your questions in our National Town Hall meeting, Brunch with Bernie, right after this.
What the frack?
What the frack?
What the frack?
President Obama, are you fracking kidding me?
Reopen the EPA studies. In Texas, Wyoming, and Pennsylvania.
Fracking pollutes our oceans.
Fracking poisons our water.
Fracking makes climate change worse.
Fracking relies on toxic chemicals that cause cancer.
Ban fracking now.
Ban fracking now.
Go on. Ban it.
Ban fracking now.
Please.
No wonder whales cry. If you knew half your family would be killed this summer, you'd be upset too. There is something you can do to prevent this pointless slaughter of Australia's whales. Please give us your support. Come to seashepherd.org.au.
Welcome back. It's our Brunch with Bernie hour. Senator Bernie Sanders answering your questions in our national town hall meeting. And let's see here. Ron in Ruidoso. How do you say that? Ruidoso, New Mexico?
Yes.
You are on the air with Senator Sanders.
Senator Sanders.
Yep.
Hello?
Hi, how are you?
Hi. I have a suggestion that you may or may not find meritorious. I'm just curious about it. And the thing that brings it up is that I see on the news that the Republicans have blocked your efforts to pass a constitutional amendment on Citizens United,
Yep.
which I know is a favorite subject of yours.
Yep.
And here is my thought. There is conceivably a way not to end it, but to hamstring it. Citizens United, I'm talking about. And here is my suggestion. What I would like to see happen is I would like to see every Democrat in the House and Senate sign a petition to the Federal Communications Commission, which says, in effect, the public owns these airways. And the use of these airways is like driving a car. It is a privilege and not a right. And therefore, the courts cannot intervene with privileges. And so what we want to do is this. What we want to do is we want to say to the Federal Communications Commission, if you are going to publish a political diatribe or some ad in favor of a candidate, before you can do that, before you can use our airways to do that, you must make a full, fair, and complete disclosure of the natural persons, not the phony baloney corporations, but the natural persons who are actually sponsoring that ad.
Okay, so Ron is calling for transparency.
Well, I think that's an excellent idea, Ron. You've touched on a few issues, and I am in agreement with you. We did try in the Senate to pass a disclosure provision. Republicans for years have been saying, well, we don't really need campaign finance reform. We don't need any restrictions. Disclosure will do the word. That's what they used to say. Now they don't say that anymore because their friends are pouring huge sums of money into the system and don't want to be disclosed. But the second point that you raised also, Ron, about the public owning the airwaves, about where I thought you were going, which I think we should go, is to say, you know what? Rather than waging campaigns on ugly and often dumb and dishonest 30-second ads, maybe we should make time available to all candidates. That's not a radical idea. That exists in other countries around the world. So if you need 20 minutes, you get a certain amount of time, you could use it however you want. But what I worry about very much is the dumbing down of the political process in this country. I worry very much that 63% of the American people don't even know which parties control the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate, and 60% of the American people are not going to probably even vote in this election. And all of that has a lot to do with the fact that we have a political process in this country where we're not talking about the real issues impacting real people. And I think that having the FCC play a role in opening up time for people to seriously explain their issues will go a long way to educate and raise political consciousness in this country.
Senator, may I ask a question?
Sure.
Over at Daily Kos, they're reporting the Koch brothers Americans for Prosperity Group has just done a massive mailer in North Carolina, and people are calling the state like crazy on this. Apparently it went out to mostly Democratic voters. It says, this is from the piece on Daily Kos, among the misinformation in the mailer, it's about how to register to vote. 2 different deadlines for mailing registration applications, instructions to return applications to the North Carolina Secretary of State's office with a return envelope addressed to the State Board of Elections, the wrong group, with the wrong zip code, directing people to the Secretary of State for more information on registering, which that office does not provide, giving the wrong phone number to the Secretary of State's office, telling people that their county clerk will inform them of their voting precinct, which county clerks don't do. They note that misinforming voters intentionally is a felony. Is this the kind of thing that Congress would ever look into?
I think so. I mean, certainly state government should as well. Here you have, and this is the first that I heard about that. I haven't seen the document, but what you have is a group, the Koch brothers, that are spending many, many hundreds of millions of dollars and a lot of money in North Carolina. And these guys believe, it's not talked about very much, but David Koch ran for vice president in 1980 on the Libertarian Party. What the platform was about is ending Social Security, ending Medicare, ending Medicaid, doing away with all campaign finance law, giving more tax breaks to the wealthy, abolishing the EPA, basically ending all federal programs that help working families. And in the last number of years, the Koch brothers have become phenomenally wealthier. They are now worth well over $80 billion, and they are spending their money on stuff like this. Lies in order to make it more difficult for people to participate in the political process. It is an outrage, and I think it should be dealt with at every level, including legally.
Thank you. We'll be right back with your calls for Senator Sanders in our National Town Hall meeting, Brunch with Bernie, right after this.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 866-987-THOM.
And you can find Bernie's website at sanders.senate.gov. And plus, he's got a very active Facebook page and a Twitter account. Check it out. Okay, let's see here. Wally in Edwards, Missouri, watching Free Speech TV on the Dish Network. You are on the air with Senator Sanders.
Yes, sir. Thank you for taking my call. I'm a first-time caller, and I would like to know if Senator Sanders has thought about running for president and having Hillary as vice president, because I think they'd win hands down.
Well, thanks very much, Wally. And the answer is I have given some thought to that. And actually, tomorrow I'll be in New Hampshire, and a couple of weeks we'll be back in Iowa. And it's a very difficult decision, but I am giving thought to it. And it's a difficult decision because the agenda that I would bring forth would require just millions of people to be actively involved in the political process, prepared to take on the billionaire class and corporate America, and try to create a nation in which government works for all of us and not just for the people on top. So not an easy task. And but that is, I'm thinking about it and going around the country a little bit, trying to determine what kind of support there is for that agenda.
Lee in Winooski, Vermont. You're on the air, and thanks for watching Free Speech TV on DirecTV. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Thank you for taking my call. This is about the Middle East situation. Most folks who have followed the Middle East for any length of time know that until we get the Shia majority Iran and the Sunni majority Saudi Arabia to work out their differences, that the world will probably be forced to be in this endless cycle of war. But how can America be a legitimate player when we are not really even allowed to discuss anything with Iran on a presidential level?
Well, Lee, good question. Lee is probably 3 miles away from where I am right now. I voted against the resolution that I believe will get the American people more deeply involved. What I worry about is kind of a perpetual war in the Middle East. And I think Lee's point is an exactly right point. ISIS is a disgusting, murderous organization that has got to be opposed. But I think we play into their hands if it appears that it is the United States of America versus ISIS, if it is the West versus the East, if it is Christianity versus Islam. That works to their advantage. What needs to happen, and I think Lee is suggesting this, is you need a coalition of the Muslim countries, and that means the Sunni nations and the Shia nations, to be saying, you know what ISIS stands for is not Islam, and their murderous activity is not acceptable, and we're going to stand up against them. It turns out that Saudi Arabia spends the fourth largest amount of money on military than any other country on earth. They spend more. People are surprised at this. They spend more than the UK does, more than France does. They have a very significant and sophisticated fleet of fighter jets. They have an army. And these are the guys who are going to have to lead the effort. I think the United States should be supportive, but it can't be an American war.
Senator Bernie Sanders with us. It's our Brunch with Bernie hour. We'll be back with more of your calls for the senator right after this. 10 minutes before the hour. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. It's our Brunch with Bernie hour. Senator Bernie Sanders taking your calls. Merlene in Morriston, Florida. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Thanks, Tom and Senator Sanders. I'm one of you. I was wondering if some way or another this is regarding the voter's ID. If the president couldn't issue an executive order authorizing the U.S. passport offices to issue ID cards to the voters. It's, we have so many people who can't get cards.
Right. Marlene, that is an interesting idea. I think the first goal has got to be is to tear down these anti-voter laws that exist in an increasing number of states. And I would hope that at the state level that will happen. But I think at the federal level we have got to be as aggressive as we can. When you talk about a democratic society, the most important issue you're talking about is the right to participate in the political process without being impeded. And there is no question that states all over this country are trying to make it harder for low-income people, for older people, for students to vote. And the reason is clear. They understand that the more people learn about their agenda, they don't want it, and they want to vote against it. And these people are trying to keep people from the polling booth. So I think, Marlene, your idea is an interesting idea. That the federal government, where necessary, might be providing the voter IDs that people need.
Andrew in Lake of the Hills, Illinois, listening to WCPT. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Senator Sanders, Mr. Hartmann, thank you for taking my call. I have a question for you about the election process, the money that goes into it. I know you've spoke before about this, but I'm concerned that the way our process works right now and the issues you all talk about will never be addressed because the election cycle changes. People come back into office, and they're elected back into office by big business, special interest, and that is what drives our policy. And I just don't see it changing ever. Even I was happy to hear that the other caller asked you if you're going to consider running for president. I hope you do. But I would think that you're going to be under the same issues that some people under the election process are, facing those same things. Your thoughts?
Well, Andrew, thank you for raising, for discussing, what I happen to believe is the most important issue when we talk about domestic issues. Because you can't talk about the environment, you can't talk about healthcare, you can't talk about jobs, infrastructure, the economy, education. You can't talk about those issues without talking about campaign finance. And let us be very clear. As a result of these disastrous Supreme Court decisions, Citizens United, McCutcheon, what we have now is the ability of billionaires to spend as much money as they want on the political process, which means they are literally buying elections. And I do not believe that that is what American democracy is about. And so long as you have billionaires buying elections, the people who get money from them or get their support are going to be beholden to them. Earlier in the program, I talked about a poll which shows that the American people are pretty unified in understanding that the government has got to be active in protecting the interest of working families, jobs, raising the minimum wage, education, and so forth and so on. That's what the American people want. They want the wealthy to pay their fair share of taxes, not lower taxes. They want Social Security to be expanded, not cut. But so long as you have people who, for all intent and purposes, are on the payroll of the Koch brothers, that is the agenda that they are going to be pushing. Cuts in Social Security, Cuts in Medicare, cuts in Medicaid, cuts in education, more tax breaks for the rich, more money into the military. So I think Andrew is exactly right. Unless we get a handle, and I'll tell you something, people ask me, am I going to run for president or whatever? The stumbling block is I am not sure at this point whether any candidate who stands up for the middle class and working families can beat the billionaire class because of their enormous power. That is the sad reality. Now, we're not going to give up. We have to continue that fight. We got to win this election that's coming up. But let's be very real, as Andrew says. These guys have unbelievable power with all of their money, and that is the major issue that we have got to be focusing on.
Frank in Springfield, Ohio. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Yeah, Senator Sanders, this is Frank, and God bless you. I hope you run. I'd be one of your biggest supporters. And I am unique in these here people that chicken hawks don't have the situation I have. I have 5 kids, 4 boys and 1 daughter-in-law, served in the service at the same time. 2 was in the Persian Gulf at the same time. They're all out now. Then I got 3 granddaughters, 1 in the Air Force and 2 in the Army that are serving now.
Frank, pardon me. We're almost out of time here. Can you quickly ask the senator a question?
These chicken hawks want us to go to war, but when it comes to them, Senator, why doesn't anybody challenge them to say, bring back the draft or let their kids go?
All right, Frank, very good question. Very good question. I'm not in favor of the draft, but I think the point that you are making is that when you have a volunteer army, it is not the children of the wealthy or corporate America who are going to be fighting in Syria or Iraq. It is basically working families, the kids of working families who come from working families. And it's very easy to send those kids off to war if it's not your own kid. So I'm not a fan of the draft, but I do think we need a foreign policy which understands that just because the kids in the military do not come from wealthy families, that we're going to protect those kids as well and not get them into wars that we should not be fighting.
Senator, 30 seconds to the end of the hour. Final thoughts?
What I want to say is that these are tough times in our country. They're tough times economically and they're tough times politically. But the stakes are much, much too high in terms of issues like war and peace, the creation of jobs, the opportunity for kids to get an education. We cannot get discouraged and not participate. In fact, we have to double our political efforts, because if we see Republicans controlling the Senate, do you think things are bad right now? They're going to get a heck of a lot worse.
Senator Sanders, thanks so much for dropping by.
My pleasure. Take care.
Always an honor.